So yeah, welcome to this webinar that we're running at Ubiquity as part of our Global Skills, Sustainability and Regenerations program. In this webinar, what we're going to be doing is looking at this question of how can we build sustainable local economies in very concrete, practical ways. So what can we actually do about it? And for me, you know, the kind of core of all of this as we look at ourselves in relationship to the world around us is what are the needs out there in the world? What are our talents and how do we help them connect? And how do we create economic systems that really enable us as individuals to bring the best of who we are to make a positive difference in the world? So that's why I love this Aristotle quote, where your talents meet the needs of the world, therein lies your vocation. So this is the kind of thesis in a way that I want to work through during this webinar. Current structures of economics and work are damaging people psycho-spiritually, dividing our communities and destroying the rest of life on Earth. We can influence this by taking action in our communities to build parallel economies that make the old one obsolete. So this is drawn, a lot of what we're going to go through here is drawn from the Why Workbook that I wrote, so you can find a lot more background there. And we're going to focus particularly on the community economics bit. Really with this thesis that to be able to create an economic context that enables us to meet human needs and planetary needs at the same time, while this kind of crazy large-scale economy is doing its thing, we have to find a way to be able to create an economic context that we have some level of control and leverage over. So that's why this focus on the community level, because here there really are tools we can go out and use now that enable us to build these parallel systems. So a little bit before we get into the specifics of how we do it, of the kind of argumentation, I guess, behind it. So at the moment, work, the activity, productive activity we do, is basically valued in terms of how much money it generates, not life value. And yet what's surely most important about our activity and how we spend our lives is how it's contributing to the lives of people, planet, and the community around us. So this quote from Audre Lorde: "The principal horror of any system which defines the good in terms of profit rather than in terms of human need is that it robs our work of its erotic value, its erotic power, and life appeal and fulfillment." So Audre Lorde is really using the word erotic here to mean the creative power. And what we need right now with all of these challenges that we're facing is we need people to create stuff, to really be able to be unleashed and do the things that need to be done to try to solve the challenges that we're facing. So a system that deadens that is really preventing us from doing the work that needs to be done. And then Fritjof Capra: "We cannot be empowered by work that destroys the environment around us or creates systems of inequality. No matter how our work is organized, it cannot fully empower us unless we believe in its purpose." So we've got to create a context that enables us to do work that we feel aligned with, and that's what's going to enable us to feel fulfilled and empowered and make the contribution that we can. So in this context, we need this world of work to bring out everybody's highest potential, right? So that everybody is contributing what they can to help us navigate this transition. Starhawk says, "The task seems therefore to be how we can connect our psycho-spiritual needs with those of our everyday lives." There's not something separate, but integrated. We don't leave our soul in the car park when we go to work. How to build a bridge that brings into the world of the everyday a sense of the sacred. And in this way, the everyday changes, deepens, until the sacred, like an underground stream, wears away control from below. So how do we create a context that enables us to do this, for people to really start doing work that is aligned while meeting, our basic needs as well? Problem is that at the moment, it's so pervasive, this economic system, that we've all become dependent on it. And now that system itself is proving to be fundamentally flawed. We're in this kind of stuck position. Yeah, well, we have to get a job to earn a living to pay the mortgage. The jobs and the kind of work context are all, not necessarily constructive to creating the world that we need to create. So how do we get out of this kind of chicken and egg situation? Richard Douthwaite did a lot of work on this. A large part of the world's population, he says, has actually lost the means and ability to provide for itself, and has become dependent on a single, highly unstable economic system that has no use for a growing proportion of it. No use for a growing proportion of it, of the people. For the next few years, unless there is a trade war, politicians are unlikely to be willing or able to protect their citizens from being damaged by this system, even though it is now actually running backwards and making life worse throughout the world. And we've definitely seen examples of that. So if we're not going to be able to solve these problems through our current economic system, then how do we do it? The place we can take control over our economy is at the community level. And this came from Keynes originally, right? The person who's meant to be behind this whole market economy, free market, global economy that we have, although people will say this isn't actually what he intended, but it was inspired by his work initially. He actually said, I sympathize with those who would minimize rather than maximize economic entanglement between nations. Ideas, knowledge, art, hospitality, travel, these are the things which should of their nature be international. But let goods be homespun wherever it is reasonably and conveniently possible. And above all, let finance be primarily national. Or we can even take it to a lower level than that, a level closer to home than that, as we'll see. It's really this idea of subsidiarity they talk about in governance, decisions being taken at the most local level appropriate, and then only being scaled up when it can't be solved, or when the issue is trans-local or trans that particular context. So what does that look like? Well, this is the key template, as it were, that I'm going to keep referring to as we go through here. These are the different aspects that we have within our power to be able to create at the community level. There is an aspect of finance and currency. We need a way to be able to trade with each other. There's an aspect of business. So how are we going to create the things that we need to create and be able to produce those for each other? And there's a very important aspect of land, which we're going to come to as well. Who owns the land? How are decisions made about how land is used? All of these areas, from the financial to the kind of business and enterprise side to the land side, are all things that we can have influence over and start to build parallel economic systems that are much more effective at meeting our own needs, meeting the local community needs, and meeting the needs of the environment. So we're going to go through these three different areas in a little bit of detail, and I'll say a bit about the different aspects. You can always go out and look up more if you want to find out the details of how, but just to show you that all of these are definitely within reach, that we can be building these systems on our doorstep if we choose to. So currency. Money that's generated as being the purpose keeps circulating as much as possible locally. So at the moment, if you buy stuff in your store or your supermarket, it's often produced by a company that exists outside of your community. So many of the things that we buy, we put our money in, and that money's taken out of the community. So the question is, how do we keep the money circulating within the local economy so it isn't siphoned off to companies elsewhere who have no interest in the community's well-being, right? So there's a few examples that we're going to work through in this. One is community banks, credit unions, local currencies, and then something called local exchange and trading systems. So the purpose here being to look at the means of exchange, where we could just be doing barter, of course, but barter limits the flexibility. Obviously, if I give you one thing for another, you have to give me something back. So there's got to be some kind of currency that enables us to exchange things more effectively. And of course, as I make a note here, the blockchain can help with this, as we're seeing. So on the currency side, to start with community banks. So the thing about community banks is that the funds they gather come from the local community itself, and the community bank decides who and how and under what conditions money is going to be given or lent or spent in the community. So it means that the interests or the criteria when somebody is making a judgment about should so-and-so such and such a business get a loan or not, or should so-and-so be able to take out a mortgage or whatever it is in the context of the community needs. So the funds are owned by the community. There is also this sense of knowing each other. And so you're far more likely to behave responsibly with any money you're lent, like on the micro credit schemes. That's why they have such a big repayment success, because people know each other. We have here something that's more as not just these banks, but also insurance schemes. So we have, for people who are self-employed, a scheme where there can be up to 50 members who live locally who can join. And it's for, if you get sick, for example, if you're self-employed, the ability for you to be able to get a payout if you get sick. Everybody in that group of 50 puts in some money, and you stay owner of that money. So it's not like paying something to an insurance company who then owns the money, but it stays in your bank account. And then if somebody gets sick, everybody pays a small amount out to cover that person's needs. And what we found is that and this is now gone very much national in the Netherlands, is that the trick is people find it actually hard now to ask for money because they don't feel they want to ask their friends, as it were, that they know to help them out. So the biggest challenge we have is, when people are sick, is to actually have them claim their healthcare insurance, as it were. So it's the same concept, right? It's where the ownership is held for, in this case, the bank, for example. So credit unions. Credit unions you may be more familiar with. You can see they're kind of all over the world, really. This example on the left is from California, example from the right is from Bangladesh. Again, the key is that this is a member-owned financial cooperative. So unlike the community bank, for example, that would be run more like a normal business, but limited in its scope to the community, the credit union is actually member-owned, controlled by its members, operated on the principle of people helping people, providing its members credit at competitive rates, as well as other financial services. Yeah. So you get access to the credit through a credit union if you're a member. On the community bank, the community bank could choose to lend to anybody in the community, and there's no members of the bank. So it's just another form. It's the cooperative form, in a way, of a community bank. And these are quite common. I mean, in the US, I know there's quite a few, many different parts of the world, credit unions are quite popular. That's another way. A more radical approach is to create your own local currency. So actually print money, essentially, that can be used within a certain geographical location. And that can be more your community, your town, your village, or it could scale up to a region. There could be currencies linked to specific communities. So that could be communities of interest. It doesn't have to be geography as such. And it's complementary to the existing national or regional currency. Regional, I mean, for example, the euro. But the point is that that money stays within the community and flows within the community context. So there's an example down there is the Salt Spring Island dollar. You can see on the left, and on the right there's the Bristol pound, which was one of the most successful local currencies in the UK. So potentially you could have a set of parallel currencies operating like in this way of subsidiarity, essentially at many different levels, in parallel to each other. And there could be a translation scheme. I was talking to a guy the other day who does a lot with blockchain, who was talking about, we were discussing the possibility of these parallel currencies being able to interact with each other, etc. But the key thing is that that currency circulates locally. So the wealth stays within the community and isn't siphoned off outside of the community to people who have no interest in the community context. And then maybe even a step further is what are called local exchange and trading systems, or LETs, that have been around a long time. I remember in the 1990s, I was doing some research into LETs. And they're basically a community enterprise that is like a ledger of exchanges. So, people can, there's a list of the goods that you, or services that you have to offer. Each individual, anybody can sign up, become a member of the LET system. And there's a list of things that you need. And when we first did it, this was like you had a booklet that was reprinted regularly. Now, of course, being online, it's a lot more easier to be able to match the needs and the requests. And basically, you have a currency and you give it a name, whatever name you want to give it. So I put the example of the Culemborg one here, and they're called Kuiltjes, which is just the name of the currency in Culemborg. And you can basically negotiate with each other how much you want to pay for somebody's product or service. So, people obviously have in their minds maybe the euro price or the dollar price when they're negotiating. But you can also choose, because maybe somebody has got plenty and they're willing to pay more for something than somebody else who's got less, and can just say, yeah, at the moment I'm unemployed, for example, or I'm between jobs, and then you'd be willing for them to give you less of the LETs coin, as it were, than otherwise. The other funny thing about LETs, which takes a bit of getting used to, is when you start in the system, everybody starts at zero. And then what that means, of course, is that some people initially have to go into debt for other people to go into credit. And so in the LET system, debt is not seen as a problem. In fact, if you're in debt more, it means that you're, if you think about it, supporting others to generate wealth because you're using the services of others. Now, of course, you need to think about limits to this, that people don't exploit the system. So they might have a kind of checkpoint where they say, okay, if it gets over 1,000 in debt or whatever, then we'll go and have a conversation with them. But that's the point, because it's local, you can have the conversation. And the conversation might include things like the person might say, yeah, at the moment, I'm in a bit of trouble because of this and that. And the community might agree to support them and to allow them to continue to go into debt and use the services of other people in the community, which for the others isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they're getting credits through it that they feel they can then go on and spend. So it's really a system that it's a kind of advanced barter system in a way, where you can kind of find people who have the different things they have to offer. And again, because it's community-based, the level of trust, of course, is very high. If somebody's messing with you, you know where to find them and go and have a conversation about them, and talk to each other about it. So reputation plays a big role here as well, but not just virtual reputation, but really in person. You know, you're going to see each other walking around, basically. So the let systems, in the early days when they developed, they were particularly popular in places where there was high unemployment and people had less money. The funny thing is that often you get people who are slightly more wealthy and maybe interested in these topics join because they feel it's a good thing, but they never really use it because there's not really that essential need. So it's a real conscious choice you have to make if you're going to set up a let system to actually start using it and work with the local businesses, which we'll come to in a sec, to accept the let's currency, because obviously they need to then be able to spend it in some way to be able to balance the books, or else, you know, they'll just be gaining lots of lets and they'll not be able to use it to pay for any of the things they need to develop their product or service. So it requires a few pieces to be put into place, but it definitely works and is a very good alternative to the normal currency. Okay, so that was kind of the currency, the money side of things. How do we build that piece in locally? Plenty of ways to do that, either, as I said before, using the mainstream currency and building more community-owned systems for that, like the community banks and the credit unions, or to create alternative currencies like an actual local currency, or create something like a let system. So the next step is that how do we make it possible for us to meet as many of our core needs as locally as possible, so that we're not dependent on providers outside of the community who we don't know, and the quality of whose service we don't know, we don't know the ethics of their business. So how do we create a context that enables us to meet as many of those needs as locally as possible? For example, our food, energy, and housing needs. And the structure that has been is most popular really in the setting up of these community businesses is a cooperative structure that we'll come on to in a minute, that supports that kind of business, which is really rooted in the local community. And at the same time, to be able to meet food needs, for example, something like a community supported agriculture scheme that supports the local farmers, you know where your food comes from, and makes you less dependent on food coming from elsewhere that you maybe don't know the source of and things. So let's cover a few of these here. So in a business, the cooperative is a definition of a cooperative from the association. So a cooperative is an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned enterprise. So the cooperatives are owned by their members. You remember the credit union was like a financial cooperative, and every person has one vote, every member has one vote to elect the board of directors. So this means, again, that your business that's delivering this need is owned by its members. The members have influence on the organizations. The members live locally. So if things are going counter to the needs in the local community, then those members can actually exert their power. One example, so the photo on the right is again from the community, the town where I live here, Culemborg, and this is Termobello, which is the local energy supply company that actually provides energy through a grid system to a large portion of this neighborhood, and again is set up as a cooperative. Likewise, there we have here a car hire scheme that is situated in a solar panel covered car park. Just over there. I keep looking over towards it, and that's also a cooperative. So it's also run by the members. So the members who rent the cars, which are all electric cars, charged by the solar panels. That was initiated by a local energy company um, based in the town as well, and raised its money by inviting people to lend money as loans to the initiative to create the solar panel car park. And then another business sprung up offering these electric cars that charged from the car park, etc., etc. So you can see how these things spin off of each other as well as because why? Because people know each other locally and they start talking to each other about it. And if there's a bit of entrepreneurialism there, then they will start to explore, with each other how to build a business opportunity around it. But then those opportunities are grounded in the local context and very close to the needs of the people living locally. So yeah, you can see the list of benefits there from the one of the cooperative associations. So community supported agriculture. Here's a definition. So it connects the producer and the consumers within the food system by allowing the consumer to subscribe to the harvest of a certain farm or group of farms. So here, and we also have a community supported agriculture system at the farm called Katsache that rather blurry photo is of. And what happens is you basically pay a weekly amount, and you can have like a small packet or a medium packet or a large packet, and you get every week a packet of vegetables and fruit, which are produced as much as possible at the farm itself. It's not only produced at the farm because sometimes there's not enough, but the basic amount is produced at the farm, and then other stuff is imported, organic food, but normally also locally from the region. We happen to live in a region where there's a lot of fruit trees and things, so a lot of that fruit comes from the region as well. And it means that the farmers have a sort of guaranteed income, because they know that as a subscription they're going to get a certain amount in every week, and that really helps them with their planning and their development, gives them a certain level of security. And when they were getting going early on, you can see in the distance of the photo there's a kind of brown roof. That wasn't there. They had they were living in kind of caravans and with their young kids, like trailer homes. And then what they did is they actually crowdfunded the money they needed to put the down payment on a mortgage so they could build their own house. And that came out of the community and, of course, the people who had subscribed to the farm scheme. So you see again how you can, as you start to build these systems in locally and build the fabric of relationship into the economic system locally, then all sorts of other initiatives emerge based on trust. They also crowdfunded the building of a new greenhouse, for example, recently, some of which was just donations and some of which was loans, longer term loans. So this again connects our communities to the source of their food. The farms like this become places where the community gather, so they'll often have events there, or little fairs, those kind of things. So it all builds the fabric of trust, relationship at that local level. And this sense is also, of course, creating a more ecological food system, because they run it organically as well. So, and the last piece here is this question of land, which is a really important one, because a lot of these initiatives can be stymied if the land is not available either for farming or for the community housing or whatever it is. Often with land speculators, they'll buy a piece of unused land and they'll just hold on to it until at some point in the future they hope that the value of the land will increase, because maybe there's a housing corporation that gets interested in it to build something on it, and then the value goes up, and only then will they sell the land. So what they often do is that land will just sit there and not able to be used because these speculators are holding on to it, whereas there are real community needs that could benefit from access to that land. So one way to work with that is these community land trusts. So non-profit corporations, right, that hold the land on behalf of the place-based community, serve as the kind of long-term steward, and therefore you can think of affordable housing, community gardens, buildings that might be useful for the community, business spaces, and other community assets. Right, so the land trust, the community, again, you would have members of the community who would be on the board of this land trust, and then they would look after pieces of land and manage them in the interests of the local community, make sure that more land is made available to be able to do things at the community level and support this kind of network in the image that enables both the farming, the food supply, the building, the businesses to be grounded in that community context. So those are kind of the main elements, as it were. All of these things that I've described have been around for a while. There's plenty of help out there. There are associations who can help educate you in how to set up a credit union, how to set up a local exchange trading system, how to build community cooperatives and cooperative businesses, food co-ops, the whole community supported agriculture schemes. This is something that we can do. So whereas it seems so hard for us to get a grip on this mainstream economic system that feels so destructive and seems to be right at the core of the problems we're facing, today we can go out there and build these parallel economic systems that bring the economy and well-being into our grasp, that help us actually create a system that we feel is much better aligned with the needs of people, with the needs of the planet, and with the needs of our communities. We can actually do these things now. So to finish on a couple of quotes that inspire me and resonate with this, Buckminster Fuller's quote: "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And this is what you do when you start to build your local community economics. You're building a parallel system and gradually withdrawing consent from the old system, channeling energy over, channeling resources over to be able to do what we know we want to do, but seems so hard to do within the current system. And that's why I like this one as well, was this proceed until apprehended. So what's going to happen? You know, all these questions come up. What's going to happen about taxation? What's going to happen about this and that? What's going to happen if these local economic systems start to withdraw resources or reduce the input into our national economic system and ultimately affect global domestic product, right? Which is our measure of progress at the moment. What happens then? So the weird thing is that our measure of progress only measures the amount of real money that is actually exchanged between people. Well, what happens if we create parallel systems that are really meeting people's needs, community needs, the planet's needs, but not going through the mainstream economy? Then it starts to look like the country isn't progressing as well as it was before, which is absolute rubbish in terms of the quality of life and the impact that it's having. But how is the government going to respond then if these things do get to scale? Well, we will see. But the trick is proceed until apprehended. Don't let these abstract questions stop us. And when we meet these kind of challenges and questions start to be asked, then we'll deal with them then. But when there's a momentum, when people can see that it's actually meeting their needs, it's much harder to stop it than if you're kind of waiting for permission, as it were, to do this thing. So that's why this proceed until apprehended is such a great phrase, because it's like, don't wait for permission. Proceed. When we get stopped, if we get stopped, then we'll deal with those questions as they come up. So just to let you know what else is out there, if you want to go deeper into these kind of topics, we have a whole global skills, sustainability and regeneration program at Ubiquity that goes from a certificate with a few courses as part of it, the BA program and the MA program. So feel free to dig around on the ubiquityuniversity.org site, find other things you can go into there if you're interested in these topics. And then I just heard earlier from our team that for people who have actually joined this webinar, we are offering you a discount, significant discount on this course on cities and sustainability, with Marilyn Hamilton, who, as some of you might know, is a real expert in this area. So if anybody's particularly interested in regeneration and sustainability at the city level, then feel free to dig into this course. Use this code sustainability120, and that'll give you a $120 discount on the program. The QR code will take you straight there, or you can just jump onto the website and find it there.